The autumn evening had folded itself neatly over the university, the kind of night where the lampposts hummed faintly and the campus seemed stitched together by golden circles of light. Emma Carter kept her head down as she crossed the library's marble steps, a satchel of books slung across her shoulder, her sneakers whispering against the cracked pavement. She looked like any other freshman, shoulders hunched under the weight of coursework, hair pulled into a plain knot, hoodie faded from too many washes. To most, she was invisible. To those who noticed at all, she was the quiet girl who worked the late shifts at the library, eyes shadowed by exhaustion, mouth always pressed into a thin line that made her seem older than 18. Her professors admired her precision but called her distant. Classmates muttered that she didn't fit in, that she was always watching instead of speaking. They weren't wrong. Emma's gaze never rested. Even as she checked out books, even as she walked back to her dorm, her eyes swept corners, scanned windows, measured shadows. It was a habit she couldn't unlearn. The ordinary mask she wore, a freshman buried in studies, was only paper thin, hiding a past no one on this campus could begin to guess. At the dining hall, whispers circulated. She didn't party, she didn't date. Some swore she was paranoid, that she carried pepper spray everywhere, that she sat in classrooms closest to exits as if plotting escape routes. To them, she was strange. To Emma, it was survival. Tonight the campus was still, save for the hum of vending machines and the faint shuffle of students heading back to their dorms. Emma walked the quad alone, her steps steady, her breath crisp against the cooling air. She was rehearsing an exam answer in her mind when a low vibration tickled the ground beneath her feet, her brow knit. The vibration grew into a tremor, then into a sound that rattled windows and sent birds scattering from trees. Rotors. Emma froze, her heart stuttering, her eyes tilting skyward. Out of the dark came the thunder of blades, heavy and relentless, chopping the night open. A black helicopter dropped from the clouds, its floodlights sweeping across the quad. Then another, and another. Screams broke out around her as students spilled from dorms, laughter turning into shrieks, phones raised to capture the spectacle. Books fell, backpacks were abandoned. Figures sprinted in every direction, scattering like ants under sudden rain. But Emma didn't move. Her blood ran cold as the first helicopter descended toward the soccer field, its skids smashing grass flat beneath its weight. Soldiers poured out black gear, visors gleaming, rifles shouldered with the kind of precision no campus had ever seen. Her breath caught in her throat. They weren't here by accident. They weren't here for a drill. One soldier lifted his head, his visor turned toward her like a predator finding its mark. Emma's stomach twisted into ice. In the chaos of panicked students, in the flood of light and the roar of engines, something became painfully clear. They weren't here for anyone else. They were here for her. The floodlights pinned Emma where she stood, a harsh white glare that stripped away shadows and left her exposed in the middle of the quad. Students screamed around her, the roar of the blades tearing the night into pieces, but she could barely hear them over the pounding of her own heartbeat. Soldiers in black gear swept across the field in perfect formation, their movements too sharp, too precise for anything resembling a drill. They weren't campus security, weren't National Guard weekend warriors. This was Delta Force. She tried to convince herself they were here for someone else, some other crisis, some other name scribbled on a secret file. But then a voice cut through the chaos, clear and heavy with authority, amplified through a comms system. Emma Carter. Her knees locked. The sound of her name hit like a blow. Not her student ID, not some mistaken roll call. Her real name. Spoken in a tone that carried weight, like the syllables had been waiting in silence for years, waiting for the night to break and claim her. The crowd heard nothing unusual, just a soldier barking orders into the noise of confusion, but Emma felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't heard her name spoken like that since she was a child, not since the program. Memories, jagged and half-buried, surged from the corners of her mind. Concrete floors under bare feet, the echo of boots against warehouse walls. voices shouting code words she was forced to repeat until her throat ached, the sharp crack of a pistol on a metal barrel used to train her to stop flinching. And always the ink, the burn of a needle pressing deep into her skin when she was barely more than 12, branding her shoulder with a symbol she didn't understand at the time. A circle split by 3 jagged lines, etched in black. The mark of the ghost program. Emma had covered it for years, hiding it beneath long sleeves, beneath the ordinary costume of a freshman who didn't want to be seen. But now her shoulder felt hot, like the mark was glowing through her skin, pulling the soldiers toward her as surely as a beacon. Her breath fractured as she stumbled backward, her eyes darting for an exit, some path through the madness. Students were running in every direction, filming with their phones, screaming about the invasion of their quiet campus. To them, it was spectacle, something to upload before the night was over. To Emma, it was the end of her carefully constructed lie. She turned to run, her satchel slipping from her shoulder, but the helicopter lights followed her, locking on, brighter than daylight. Every move she made was illuminated, broadcast to hundreds of panicked eyes. The soldiers spread wider, sweeping the quad, their rifles angled low, herding the crowd away. Not toward her. Away from her. Clearing the stage until she was the only one left in the center. Her lungs burned as the truth pressed in from all sides. This wasn't random, this wasn't coincidence. They had come for the girl who tried to vanish, the girl who once belonged to the ghosts. Emma's feet refused to move. For the first time in years, she felt the walls of the past close around her, unyielding and merciless. She had thought she escaped. She had thought she buried it. But the mark on her shoulder had always been a promise. And now the program had come to collect. The rotor wash whipped the grass flat against the ground, scattering papers and backpacks into the air like brittle leaves. The floodlights narrowed, cutting a circle of blinding white across the quad. From the belly of the lead helicopter, a figure descended the ramp, boots striking earth with a weight that carried authority before a word was spoken. The soldiers parted for him. His face was hidden beneath shadow and helmet, but his presence was unmistakable. This was the one in command. Emma felt her breath lock in her throat as he strode toward her, the night trembling around each step. He stopped just short of the light's edge, where his features were swallowed by darkness, and his voice carried low but sharp enough to pierce the roar of blades. Emma Carter, come with us, quietly, or I will make sure every soul here sees what you really are. Her stomach dropped. The words were a noose tightening around her neck. He wasn't bluffing. She had seen enough to know what Delta Force could do, how easily they could unravel her mask and lay bare the truth she had spent years burying. Her eyes flicked to the crowd, students clutching each other, streaming toward dorms, phones held high. All it would take was one wrong move, one revelation, and the life she'd built as an ordinary freshman would burn in the glare of their screens. Emma? A whisper came from the edge of the chaos. Her head snapped toward the sound. Her roommate, Claire, stood half-hidden behind a lamppost, eyes wide, face pale with fear. She must have followed when Emma left the library, curiosity outweighing caution. Now she was caught in the web, hearing every word. The commander's head turned slightly, visor glinting as though he too had noticed. Emma's chest tightened. Claire couldn't know. If she became part of this, she would never escape. Emma forced her features to stay blank, her voice steady, though her insides quaked. There's been a mistake. But the commander only tilted his head, as if amused by the attempt. Before he could respond, the night split with another sound gunfire. Sharp cracks rang out from the perimeter of campus. Muzzle flashes burst in the distance. Shouts of confusion and pain bled into the roar of engines. The soldiers tensed instantly, rifles swinging toward the tree line. This wasn't part of their operation. Another force had arrived. Enemy operatives. The kind who had been hunting Emma since the day she slipped free of the program's grip. The quad erupted in chaos. Students screamed louder, some dropping flat to the ground, others fleeing into the dark. Floodlights swiveled wildly as the helicopters powered higher, rotors screaming against the night. The commander barked orders, his men moving with surgical speed to counter the assault. And in the crossfire, Emma's mask cracked. A man in civilian clothes but carrying a rifle broke through the chaos, sprinting toward her. His weapon swung up, barrel flashing with intent. Instinct overrode fear. Emma lunged forward, one hand snapping his wrist, the other driving an elbow into his throat. He went down hard, rifle clattering across the grass. In the same motion, she spun, dropped to one knee, and secured the weapon with a fluidity no freshman should possess. Her movements were too clean, too practiced, not desperate, trained. Claire's gasp carried faintly through the noise, her eyes fixed on Emma with shock that cut deeper than any bullet could. Around them, the firefight raged, but Emma barely heard it. In that instant, she knew the choice had already been made for her. The commander's words still lingered, but the truth was already bleeding out. The girl everyone thought was a loner, paranoid, strange, was something else entirely. Emma Carter was no ordinary freshman. And the world had just seen the ghost behind the mask. Smoke still curled above the rooftops as the last shots faded into silence. The quad, once a place of scattered books and nervous laughter, lay scarred by muzzle flashes and the blackened scent of cordite. Students huddled in corners, whispering frantically, their phones clutched tight but forgotten. Overhead, the heavy blades of the helicopters stirred the air into violent spirals, drowning out every other sound. Emma stood in the center of it all, chest rising and falling, the rifle still warm in her grip. Her hands should have been trembling, but they weren't. They never did after battle. It was muscle memory, drilled into her bones long before she had stepped foot on a campus. Around her, the Delta Force soldiers moved with machine-like precision, securing the field, herding the wounded toward safety, dragging the fallen enemy operatives away. None of them looked at her with suspicion. They looked at her like she was already theirs. A soldier broke formation and stepped into her space. The commander. His shadow stretched long beneath the floodlight as he reached out, not to seize her, but to guide her toward the waiting helicopter. His gloved hand pressed firmly against her back, pushing her forward without words. Emma resisted for a heartbeat, her eyes darting toward the lamppost at the edge of the field. Claire was there, face pale, frozen in shock. Their eyes met. Claire's lips parted as if to call out, but no sound came. Emma wanted to shout back, to tell her it wasn't what it looked like, that she was still the girl who worked library shifts and hated loud dorm parties. But the words lodged in her throat because that girl was already slipping away. The commander leaned close as they reached the helicopter's open bay. His voice was a rasp under the roar of blades, meant only for her ears. You were never meant to have a normal life. The program never ended, and now it's starting again. The weight of the words pressed heavier than any rifle. Soldiers strapped her into the seat, the harness clicking shut across her chest. She sat rigid, staring straight ahead as the engines screamed, the world vibrating around her. Through the open side door, the campus looked smaller, drowned in chaos and emergency lights. Fires flickered along the edge of the field where stray rounds had caught dry grass. Sirens wailed in the distance, late to a scene that had already rewritten everything. Her gaze locked onto one last image before the helicopter lifted fully from the ground. Claire, standing with her arms wrapped tight around herself, eyes locked upward, face caught between terror and disbelief. Emma's chest ached. She knew Claire would never see her the same way again. Maybe no one would. The chopper climbed higher, and the campus fell away into a blur of smoke and shadow. Emma pressed her forehead against the cool steel of the frame, shutting her eyes for a moment. Inside her chest, a war raged, two halves pulling her apart. One half the freshman who wanted nothing more than to read in silence, to pass exams, to be ordinary. The other the ghost carved from drills and fire, the soldier who belonged to shadows. She opened her eyes again, the reflection of the floodlight glinting in them. The mask of a scared girl was gone. Her jaw tightened, her body rigid, her silence louder than words. To the world below, it looked like she had been dragged away, powerless, another victim swallowed by the machine. But Emma knew better. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.